Hello, Internet. Welcome to 3OR Studios. I'm Anthony, and I am on a boat. So, today I'm going to be telling you guys a bit about my time in the Calvin Combat Robotics Club. Now, for those of you that don't know, I originally went to a college called Calvin University. It was up in Grand Rapids, and yeah, it was a pretty chill school. Beautiful campus, pretty laid back college life. Not really much going on. So by the time Cokes and Clubs comes out, Cokes and Clubs is basically Coca-Cola, and every club is setting up their booths to try to get you to join their clubs. Now, the reason that there's Cokes involved is because Calvin is a Pepsi campus. So, Coke up there is basically treated like a rarity, a delicacy, contraband, that kind of stuff. But that's besides the point. Anyway, Cokes and Clubs rolls around, and so I'm kind of scrolling through, checking out, seeing what they got going on. Usually I join their robotic football team, but it was getting kind of boring. I wanted something a little bit more violent, if you catch my drift. So eventually I stumble across this booth advertising Calvin Combat Robotics. Now, this tickles my fancy, to say the least. So, of course, I immediately sign up. And lo and behold, first meeting comes around. It's actually kind of slow. It's all the general garb. This is us. This is what we're gonna do. Here's your safety rules. So basically, what these guys do is they split all of us off into teams. Now these teams are ours for the year, and it is our job to build a combat robot and make it so good that it just dominates the battlefield. So I get teamed up with this guy. We're gonna call him Caleb for now. So, well, there was this Caleb, and then there was actually a guy. We're gonna call him Jarvis. So anyway, we're a trio. We're thinking, hey, we're gonna do a horizontal spinner. Now, for those of you who are interested in the actual BattleBot series, a horizontal spinner is basically just a lawnmower blade. So, knowing that, I decide, hey, let's call our robot Lawnmower. Yes, Lawnmower. He cuts grass and kicks ass. Anyway, anyway. So, Jarvis, I'm not sure what happened to Jarvis. He was there for the first few meetings, but then he kind of just disappeared, leaving Caleb and I to duo on this. And we actually do a pretty good job, all things considered. Like we spend all year kind of just putting the pre-built kits together, running this thing around, testing how much it can do and how much it can take. And so yeah, the first year of this rolls around, and I'm feeling pretty confident. Well, actually, no, it's not the first year; it's the first semester because we have the contests every semester. Anyway, the first contest rolls around, and I'm feeling pretty confident. We got this little itty bitty thin, this little thin razor thin weapon. Well, razor thin being an exaggeration, but anyway, I'm feeling pretty confident because this robot has shown to be the best at driving, the best at staying together, and just the best at everything. So this is where the funny part comes in. The first contest comes around. We throw a lawnmower in against it was Rick Roller, actually. Rick Roller, our arch nemesis for the entirety of my career there. So we throw him against Rick Roller, which is a vertical drum spinner, and it just shatters our weapon in one tap. Just one tap, the weapon on our robot is just shattered. It's in pieces. Now, me being at least slightly hopeful, I'm like, all right, it's still driving. The robot is still driving. It's unarmed, but it's still driving. Let's try and push him into one of the traps. So, for some context, these arenas, they're about the size of a table because, these robots, they're very small. They have, they're made of 3D printed plastic. So it's not anything as crazy as the actual steel robots of BattleBots, but it's still pretty crazy when you get into the ring. Anyway, these the weapon shatters. It's gone. And Caleb being the pilot, me being the strategist, I'm like, all right. put your back to him. We're going to try to push him into one of the traps. It didn't work, unfortunately. I think what ended up happening was Rickroller ended up getting some debris caught in its drivetrain, and so the wheels jammed up. So we kind of ended on a draw, which left it to the judges. Unfortunately, we lost because, our weapon was gone and Rickroller was still in one piece. So, yeah, we lost that one. Second year rolls around, though, and, we've learned from our mistakes. We've put 100% infill into our weapon, and we've made it a thick, giant hammer. It's still a horizontal spinner, perfectly symmetrical, but it's just a solid piece of plastic with some metal bits in it, to act as teeth. We end up doing better that year. We dominate the chain. Except for Rickroller. Rickroller still manages to best us. It still manages to come out on top. And it was, if you go on YouTube, look up Calvin Combat Robotics, it'll be from a couple years ago. You can see just how crazy the fight was between Rickroller and Lawnmower. So, yeah, by this point, it's basically become the running joke in Calvin Combat Robotics that Rickroller and Lawnmower are the top dogs, and they're the clashing titans. Now, the unfortunate thing is, after this point, I end up having to transfer out of Calvin and go to a different school. But I kept in touch with Caleb, who still kept working on the robot and kept making improvements. Lo and behold, it takes me leaving for us to finally beat Rickroller. And there's a sick irony of it. I ended up going back into the YouTube channel to watch it. And yeah, it was a pretty crazy fight as well. And yeah, I'm shout out to you, Caleb. If you're watching this, you know me, you know who I am. Congratulations, Lawnmower, for finally taking down Rickroller. And Rickroller, you can suck it. So, yeah, that was a little bit about my time in combat robotics. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that